There is a lot of material on this one, and I'm about to Brendan Fraser my way straight through it. Torch up, satchel packed. And yes, there may be a mummy or two in here. Who knows? Because here's the joke history has been playing for about 90 years. The movies gave their mummy monster a name: Imhotep. 1932, Boris Karloff shuffles out of a sarcophagus wearing it. 1999, it's back, cursing people and eating tourists. Hollywood picked for its face of ancient evil a real man, and the real man's name literally means he who comes in peace. That's not the twist. That's just the door. Because ancient Egypt took this man, a government official with a stone-carved resume, and over the next 2,000 years promoted him, step by step, into a full god of medicine. Temples, priests, a customer base with receipts. It is the best documented deification in human history, and today we read the file. Saqqara, around 2650 BC. King Djoser is building something no one on Earth has ever seen, a mountain of cut stone rising in steps, and standing next to him is the man this whole story runs on. Here is everything we actually have from Imhotep's own lifetime, and it fits on one object: the base of a statue of the king. Cairo Museum, catalog number JE 49889. Dug up by the English archaeologist Cecil Firth at the Step Pyramid in the 1920s. On it, next to the king's own name, an honor no commoner gets, a list of titles. Chancellor of the King of Lower Egypt, first after the king, administrator of the Great Palace, high priest of Heliopolis, chief of sculptors, and maker of vases. The future god of medicine's documented career peaks, as far as the stone is concerned, at vases. Hold that thought. It gets better. Notice what the stone does not say. It does not say, designed the pyramid. The building credit comes from tradition written millennia later. The man standing beside the first skyscraper in history is our best guess for its architect, and Egyptology treats it as a strong guess, not a signature. What is certain, no ordinary official shares a king's monument. This man was colossal. A graffito on the next king's unfinished pyramid shows he outlived Djoser and kept the job. And then he dies, and is buried somewhere at Saqqara. Remember the tomb? Everyone did, right up until everyone forgot where it was. Then something happens that almost never happens to civil servants. He refuses to stay dead. For centuries he fades, and then, more than 1,000 years after his death, Egypt's scribes start doing something strange. Before writing, they pour a drop of water from their pot as an offering to Imhotep. Egypt's entire clerical class poured one out for him, every shift, for over 1,000 years. He shows up in the Harper's Song, one of the new kingdom's greatest hits, preserved on a scroll called Papyrus Harris 500, sitting in the British Museum today. I have heard the words of Imhotep and Hardedef, whose sayings are recited whole. A banquet song, naming a bureaucrat dead for a millennium as a household sage. And the same song drops a detail we'll need later. The great sage's tombs, it says, their walls have collapsed, their places are gone. His tomb was already lost 3,000 years ago. Then, around 664 BC, comes the promotion of promotions. The priests of Memphis stop calling him a wise man and start calling him the son of the god Ptah. Read that again. 2,000 years after your death, adopted by a god. That's not a legacy, that's an acquisition. The paperwork expands. He's assigned a divine mother, Keredu Ankh, added to the file 2 millennia late, genealogy by committee. And when the Greeks arrive and find Egypt's beloved healing god, they do the most Greek thing imaginable. They rebrand him. Imhotep becomes Imuthes, their own Asclepios, god of medicine. A third dynasty civil servant is now on the Greek pantheon's org chart, because by now, that's exactly what he has: customers. Saqqara becomes the healing destination of the ancient world. The sick travel there and sleep inside the temple precinct. It's called incubation, waiting for the god to walk into their dreams with a cure. And where there are pilgrims, there is a business. because there is always a business. You don't arrive at the god's house empty-handed. You buy an offering, an ibis, the sacred bird, raised, killed, mummified, and deposited in the god's catacombs with your prayer attached. Now, remember maybe a mummy or two in here? Try well over 1,000,000. The galleries under Saqqara hold more than 1.5 million mummified ibises, roughly 10,000 birds a year, an industry running for centuries. The mummies in this story aren't monsters, they're receipts. And one of those receipts has a name, Imhotep. Her funerary stone stands in the British Museum today, object number E-A147, and it tells her story in her own commissioned words, the longest text of its kind that Egypt left us. Born in December 73 BC, married at 15 to the high priest of Ptah at Memphis, 3 daughters, and no son, which in her world is not a disappointment, it's a dynastic emergency. So she and her husband go to Imhotep. The Stela says the god came to her husband in a dream and offered a deal, a beautification of his shrine in exchange for a boy. 46 BC, the boy arrives, and they name him Imhotep, a named, dated customer of a god with the contract carved in stone, praying in the same decade Cleopatra takes the throne of Egypt. Imhotep dies at 30 in 42 BC, and her husband has the whole story cut into the stone that now stands in a museum in London. When we say documented, this is what we mean. Which brings us to the question this channel exists to ask out loud. The god of medicine, was he ever a doctor? Open the file from his own lifetime. Chancellor, priest, chief of sculptors, vase department. Medicine? Nothing. Open the next 2,000 years of records. Still nothing. Historians put it flatly. There is no source connecting Imhotep to medicine until after he became a god. So where does history's first physician come from? 3 places, and watch each one wobble. 1. The Edwin Smith Papyrus, genuinely the world's oldest surgical text. 48 trauma cases, brutally rational. In 1930, the great James Henry Breasted translated it and speculated that the original author, centuries earlier, might have been Imhotep. The scroll itself carries no author's name. 2. Sir William Osler, the father of modern medical education, calling Imhotep the first figure of a physician to stand out clearly from the mists of antiquity. Gorgeous sentence. From a lecture in 1913. It's an opinion wearing a lab coat. And 3. The kill shot. Manetho, the ancient Egyptian historian every documentary cites. His actual surviving text praises someone esteemed for his medical skill, and that someone is the king, Djoser. The name Imhotep is not in the sentence. Modern editors inserted it, in brackets, as a guess, and somewhere between the library and the internet, the brackets fell off. Our god of medicine's medical license is a footnote another century wrote in pencil. Now, the honest frame, because this matters. None of this makes the faith fake. For the woman kneeling at Saqqara, the dream and the sun were as real as anything in her life. We're not auditing the prayers, we're auditing the paperwork. And the paperwork says the god of medicine may never have treated a single patient. And then there's the document that should have ended the whole argument, and instead ends up proving everything this series has been saying. Sahel Island, near Aswan, a granite boulder carved with a full royal decree of King Djoser himself. A 7-year famine, the Nile refusing to rise, and the king's wise man Imhotep consulting the sacred archives to save Egypt. The god's origin story, in the king's own words, from the king's own time. One problem. The carving is Ptolemaic. It was cut around 200 BC, more than 2,000 years after Djoser died, by the priests of the god Khnum. And it just happens to end with King Djoser granting an enormous, very specific package of land and revenues to the Temple of Khnum, whose priests were, at that exact moment, locked in a revenue war with the priests of Isis on the next island over. Egyptology's verdict is written plainly. Merriam-Lichtheim's standard translation files it as a pseudepigraph, a fake document with a real agenda. Priests, centuries after the fact, manufacturing an ancient paper trail to win a modern argument. Sound familiar? We watched a man in Iceland do exactly this with Odin. The Egyptians did it first, in granite, with tax implications. Gods are not only worshipped into existence, they are filed into existence. And the file on Imhotep was still growing 2,500 years after his funeral, which leaves one drawer nobody has managed to open: the tomb. Walter Bryan Emery, one of the great British archaeologists, read everything you just heard and decided to finish the story, find where the man himself was buried. 7 Seasons at Saqqara, 1964 to 71, following the trail of ibis offerings toward what had to be the god's front door. He found catacombs, galleries of birds, baboons, falcons, over 1 million offerings, all pointing at a tomb that never appeared. March 1971, mid-season, on-site, Emery suffers a stroke. He dies days later in Cairo. The tomb of Imhotep has never been found. Egyptian teams are digging west of the Step Pyramid this very year, still looking. Somewhere under Saqqara, the man whose name means "he who comes in peace" is still doing exactly that. Next time, the fastest promotion in the entire file. No dreams, no temples, no 2,000-year climb. In the same year Tame Hotep is buried with her prayer, 42 BC, the Roman Senate skips the whole process and simply votes a man into godhood, by show of hands. We're going to Rome. Every name, date, and object number from today is in the description. Go check my work. That is still the entire point of this channel. And keep the oldest rule of the story in mind, because this whole series runs on it. The answers to the end are in the beginning.